Welcome inside another edition of Atlanta 10 Live. Sam Radin and former Michigan Wolverine and 1997 national champion Chris Howard, pleased to be with you. I know we spent a lot of time on this show talking football. You and I are both basketball fans, though, and we get to show off. We get to flex that. I shouldn't do that next to you. We get to flex our knowledge a little bit on the hardwood today, and we're looking forward to that. How you doing, Chris?
I'm good, man. How you doing?
I'm doing really good. I was telling you before we got started today, I love March Madness, and I've been telling the viewers on our Atlanta 10 Facebook page, and you guys can interact with us. We got all the mechanisms set up for you to do that. I love college basketball, and I love March Madness. These next couple days, the Thursday and Friday of the tournament, I didn't go to work, I didn't go to school, whatever phase of life I was at. It wasn't until I got married and had a daughter that I had to back down from it a little bit. I go to work, but I'm not going to work too hard the next 2 days. So that's about where I'm at. Are you pretty glued to the TV for this?
You know, this is actually probably the only time that I really start to pay attention to college basketball. I mean, obviously I follow Michigan, I follow all the teams in the Big Ten, but when I really kind of hunker down and really pay attention to it, it's for March Madness.
Can you go from the first game at noon until the last game at around 1 in the morning without? Can you do that?
Ooh, yeah, I don't know if I could do that.
Okay, yeah.
Oh, yeah, it's not that serious for me. I can't do that.
No worries. 2 days in a row. Probably have all the scores memorized by the end of the 2 days. Whatever. It's my problem. I got certain predilections. That's where it's at. So obviously, we'll talk some college hoops here as we get you set for what to expect on the program. We'll start off with the teams in the Big Ten that made the big dance in the NCAA tournament. Only 4 of them. And I look forward to getting your reaction about what that says about the conference. You guys can sound off as well at our Atlanta 10 Facebook page. A couple other Big Ten teams get invites to the NIT. We'll fill you in on those details. Other news and notes from around the rest of the league as we get closer and closer to the NFL draft, and some off-the-field news, recruiting, and everything that goes into these grad transfers and everything that is kind of this silly season of college football. So we'll get some of that, and then the viewer interaction, as we always love to do with you guys on our Atlanta 10 Facebook page. You can check us out right now, make your comments, tell me I'm crazy for the amount of hours I'll spend watching college basketball. Don't worry, I won't care. It won't dissuade me. I'll send you to my wife, and you guys can duke it out. So anyways, let's talk about the 4 teams that make the big dance. First of all, only 4 teams that make the big dance. I was kind of going on record last week and saying I thought Nebraska had a good shot with their victories and finishing 4th in the regular season. Penn State, obviously, with the 2 victories over Ohio State, but no dice, only 4 teams.
Yeah. Well, Sam, I hate to say that I told you so, but I told you so. There 4 teams. I'm just saying. But yeah, 4 teams we're going to make it into the tournament. Michigan State, Purdue, Ohio State. I do feel like Nebraska should have been one of those teams to make it into the tournament. If you're going to put a team like Oklahoma, who's lost probably 8 of the last 10 games that they played, they lost by 30 points against Kansas. I mean, if a team like that can make it into the tournament, then a team that was, I think, finished 3rd in the Big Ten, like Nebraska, can definitely go into the tournament and make some waves. So I know Tim Miles and his team is really disappointed they didn't make it, but I think the other travesty is for them to go into the NIT and be ranked as, I believe, a 5th seed in the NIT tournament. So I think that's to me is another travesty. So if you're Nebraska, I mean, you got to be disappointed all the way around.
Let me just get this out of the way right now, because we were doing this before we started the show. Who the heck talks about seeding in the NIT? Are you serious?
It's important. It's important for the players. You got to think beyond. It's important for the players. Yes.
So, like, if you would have gone to some 4th-tier bowl game before Christmas, and they didn't introduce you as, I don't know, the favorites or something, that would have rankled you, really?
Well, listen, you have to use that. You have to use that and fuel your passion. You have to use that to fuel you to go out there and lay punishment on people because you got hosed. Regardless of whether you're playing in the NIT or in the NCAA tournament, if you feel like you deserve to play in the higher echelon tournament, then you've got to go out and prove and just wreak havoc on the teams that are in front of you in the NIT.
I mean, on that point, I'll agree with you that Nebraska can play with a chip on its shoulder to say we got snubbed from being in the NCAA tournament, but what their seed is in the NIT,
listen, it's still a slap in the face. It's still a slap in the face if you're Nebraska.
I guess it means money, too, because if I understand these NIT games right, I can't believe, I mean, our producer's a Maryland guy, and they didn't go to any tournament. Anyway, I mean, I guess it means money about playing these home games in the NIT. Whatever, we'll save that. I want to talk about the NCAA tournament. I guess the other storyline, when you talk about the 4 Big Ten teams that are in there, is how the seeding works out. Michigan State comes in as a 3 seed, although they do get some advantageous geographical placement, right? Michigan's a 3 seed, but they're in the West region where they'd have to go to Los Angeles, and obviously Michigan State and Purdue get to stay a little bit closer to home. What do you think of the seeds of the teams that did get in?
I got to say, I was a little baffled by it because, you got, Michigan who won a Big Ten tournament. You got Michigan State who won the Big Ten championship, yet Purdue is ranked ahead of both of those teams, got better seedings than both of those teams. So that was a little confusing to me. Obviously, it was a toss-up between Michigan and Michigan State as far as who was going to get that 3 seed in Detroit. But I think that could have went either way. But the more baffling thing to me was having Purdue ranked ahead of them as far as seeding goes.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. You were talking about the situation with Oklahoma and then comparing them to Nebraska or Penn State. And one of the comments from the committee when I watched the brackets unveiled on Sunday was they were talking about the importance of games throughout the entire course of the season. Yeah. It's a little bit different, right, when you're talking about college football. There's so few games, and especially in the era when you were playing where you didn't even have, a 4-team tournament to get into the college football playoff. But with college basketball, I don't know that anyone really believes that the games you play in November are as valuable as the games you play in February or in your conference tournament in March, right?
Well, if you listen to the commissioner, I mean, he said when he evaluated Oklahoma, he basically said, well, they had some really good wins earlier in the year, but okay, that's earlier in the year. How does a team finish? And if you look at how a team finished, Oklahoma finished is about as terrible as a team as you can probably find in the NCAA tournament. So I don't know how. I think it had more to do with the young player at Oklahoma, Trey, with him being compared as the next, the kid from Steph Curry, him being compared to him. I think it was more about star power. And to me, in my personal opinion, they chose star power over a substance team like Nebraska.
That's interesting, and again, I'm not going to do that flexing thing again, but just to show you that, we could talk more about basketball. I could compare this to things that have happened in years past with other prominent teams and how they didn't get in, but we'll leave it. We'll keep it Big Ten focused for right now. Let's kind of take them one by one and talk about the prospects of some of these teams. You mentioned Purdue before. They get the highest seed of any team in the Big Ten. Purdue, a number 2 seed. When you look at their first round matchup, Purdue takes on Cal State Fullerton coming out of the Big West. I don't know a lot about them. I'd expect Purdue to kind of finish through that game without too much trouble, but as you look ahead, they could potentially match up in the Elite 8 against the number 1 seed in Villanova. How far do you see Purdue going?
I think Purdue is going to pretty much run through this bracket up until they get to Villanova. Again, like you said, they're starting it off with against Cal Fullerton. This is only the 3rd appearance Cal Fullerton has made in the NCAA tournament in the last 10 years. So I don't really see that being a fight for Purdue. Purdue will get a healthy Vince Edwards back. So, I mean, this should be pretty much a run-through for Purdue up until, of course, they meet the number 1 seed Villanova.
Well, if I had to put you on the spot, can Purdue win that game and wind up as a Final Four team? How good is this Purdue team?
I think Purdue can win that game. Listen, Purdue, I mean, as far as a three-point shooting team, they're one of the best three-point shooting teams in the country. They've got great inside-outside movement. If you shut down Haas, they can, drive and dribble penetration and kick the ball out to those guys sitting outside the arc and hit three-pointers and hurt you all day. So I think Purdue is definitely a team that can go far because I don't see a lot of teams being able to match up and take the things that Purdue does really well away from Purdue.
We both talked before about Matt Painter and how much respect for him we have as a head coach. In fact, all 4 of the Big Ten basketball teams that made the tournament this year, their coaches, even with Coach Holtman at Ohio State, with the job he did in his first year there and the previous work he did at Butler, obviously, we've reaped praise on all 4 of those guys. But I don't know about Purdue in the tournament. They seem to have kind of underperformed for some of these years that they've been really talented. They haven't really made too many deep runs. I don't know if Purdue's going to be able to avoid that kind of hiccup. They've had a couple hiccup games down the stretch in the Big Ten.
Yeah, I mean, they've definitely lost some games that they should have lost. I mean, they had obviously had a lot of momentum going into the Big Ten season, especially midway through the season. But of course, they lost a couple games they shouldn't have lost. But I think this week off for Purdue to get healthy, to get a healthy Vince Edwards back onto the floor will help them out a lot. But I think this is a better shooting team than Purdue has had in the past. I mean, again, they're leading the Big Ten in made three-pointers. So I like the way Purdue is set up for having a deep run into the tournament because, again, Purdue does a lot of things really well. They have a great inside-outside game with Haas. He has ability. He's a good passer. He has ability to kick the ball out to guys like Edwards, both Edwards, and to make those really big three-point shots. So I like the way they're situated in the tournament.
All right, let's switch gears to something else. Put it right in your wheelhouse and maybe say, there's a team that outperforms its seed in the tournament every year, in the Michigan Wolverines under John Beilein. They did that last year with that victory over Louisville, and then we know about 2013 and the run all the way to the championship game. Michigan gets the 3 seed, but they got to go out west to play. They get Montana in the first round, and then potentially a looming date in that Sweet 16 against North Carolina, a team that beat them pretty handily, albeit that being one of those games back in November that we were just kind of talking about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, Michigan, I don't think there's a hotter team in the country right now than Michigan. They're riding a 9-game win streak. They've been playing extremely well. They're the reigning back-to-back Big Ten champs. My only problem with Michigan making a deep run is anytime that Michigan has not been able to, has lost to teams, into the Elite Eight or to the Sweet Four, they've lost because of things that they're not good at. And Michigan is not a good free throw shooting team. And that's one of the things that will keep Michigan from advancing further into the tournament if they're not able to solve their free throw shooting problems. A couple years back, they weren't good at rebounding. They got killed on the glass against Kentucky. So things that have hurt Michigan from moving forward have always been the things that have kind of lingered throughout the season. And if Michigan is really going to make a deep run, they have to be a really good free throw shooting team because they're playing well, really well defensively. They're playing really well offensively. But will the free throws come back to bite them? That's what worries me about the Wolverines.
Well, you didn't take any of those losses personally, did you? Kind of rattled right off there going through that 2014 loss to Kentucky.
Yeah, man.
And then talking about some of the other troubles that Michigan's had. I think the problem that Michigan has with the free throw shooting that you're talking about, it's with the guys that have the ball in their hand at the end of the game, talking about Xavier Simpson at the point guard spot, and then Charles Matthews, who has the ball so much for them. It's hard to hide those guys. We're not talking about big centers you can take out of the game. In fact, Mo Wagner's a pretty good free throw shooter for Michigan, so you're right that could be an Achilles heel for them.
That could be an issue. I mean, Xavier Simpson is shooting under 50% as a free throw shooter. Charles Matthews is shooting just a little bit above 50% as a free throw shooter. And even Rockman, who's normally been a very good free throw shooter, I mean, he was at around 90%. I believe he's now at 60% as far as a free throw shooter. So, again, that could be something that keeps Michigan from further advancing in the tournament is the free throw shots. They have to be able to be a good free throw shooter because a lot of these games are going to be a lot closer than people think.
Yeah, I mean, that's always the case in the tournament. Guard play, and then it comes down to crunch play with free throw shooting. That could be a big deal. Well, I'll leave you off on a Michigan prediction. We'll save that for later on in the program. Let's talk about Michigan State, though. They also get a 3 seed, but they get that Midwest region where they could play in Detroit if they are able to get through those first couple of rounds with a chance to go to the Final Four. A lot of people think that Michigan State could be the Big Ten team that makes the deepest run. If you look a little bit ahead in the bracket there, you see looming right beneath them is the Duke Blue Devils. A lot of people's kind of chic pick this time of year, right, to make it to the Final Four and beyond. How would you evaluate a potential rematch between Michigan State and Duke, who, again, beat them early on in the season?
Well, I think for Michigan State, I mean, again, they've got to go back to the basics. They've got to go back to the basics of letting Miles Bridges get to the rim, use that big body, and go into the paint. Because when he's aggressive, a lot of good things happen for Michigan State. He's able to drive and kick out to guys like McQuaid, to guys like Winston that can hit big shots, or even dump it off to Jaren Jackson or to Nick Ward in the paint. So for Michigan State, they've got to just go back to being who Michigan State are. Be physical, go get buckets, go into the paint, get buckets there, really dominate inside. And for Michigan State, I mean, they've got Bucknell. They've got, if they get past Bucknell, they'll probably face TCU. Those are two games that they should win handily. But like you said, Duke is looming in that conference, so who knows? But yeah, they did beat Michigan State earlier in November, but this is a different Michigan State team.
Well, and you talk about getting through Bucknell. Bucknell's a team, they've knocked off Kansas before. They played Michigan close a couple years ago in a regular season game, and then obviously the Michigan State folks remember that Middle Tennessee issue from seasons past. So nothing's a sure shot when it comes to the tournament, but you look at the talent on that Michigan State team. You talk about Miles Bridges and Jaren Jackson. Those two guys look like they'll be stars in the NBA as early as this offseason if that's what they want. It's hard to imagine this team not putting it together for a deep tournament run.
Well, and again, you talk about the talent. I mean, this is, again, they've talked about it. Michigan State fans have talked about this as potentially Izzo's most talented team that he's had in a number of years. So if this team does not make it far into the tournament, then it'll be a very disappointing season, not only for the program, but for the fans as well.
And I guess the fourth team, not in any particular order, but that is Ohio State. They get a South Dakota State team in the first round that Michigan played back in that 2013 run in their first game. And Ohio State comes in as kind of maybe the least talked about team in the Big Ten. But you see the bracket right there for Ohio State. They've got a date potentially against Gonzaga in what would be the round of 32. And I personally think Gonzaga, when you look at how talented that team is and how they've played at the end of the season, that could be a tough outing right there for Ohio State.
Yeah, that's going to be really tough for Ohio State because one, Ohio State is just not very deep on their bench. If they get into foul trouble, they're in foul trouble. I mean, just to give you an example of lack of depth on Ohio State team, I mean, their starting point guard was a walk-on at the University of Michigan. So that tells you how they lack depth at a crucial position in the point guard position. So in order for Ohio State to really take advantage of the situation that they're in, they're going to have to get valuable minutes, not just from the guys that are on the court, but they're going to have to find some guys that can come off the bench and give them some help.
Yeah, I mean, we say all that, but then there's the bright side, right, which is Keita Bates-Diop is the player of the year in the Big Ten, and this team overperformed all year long. So obviously they've got a puncher's chance in any of these games, including that Gonzaga game, and then you never know. Once the tournament gets started, these brackets can open up a little bit, and then everything looks different when you get into that second weekend. So I guess that's an overview of it. I'll tell you, instead of putting you on the spot, I'll volunteer myself for once. The first bracket I did, I went all the way through, and I had Michigan playing Michigan State in the national championship game.
Wow,
so I can see that happening.
I really do not think my heart could take that.
You told me you had some issues, some palpitations there in the Big Ten tournament. I could see that potentially happening, and Clark Kellogg, a national analyst, has Michigan potentially winning it all. So I'll put you on the spot now that I volunteered that. Which Big Ten team?
Because that's the problem when people start talking